In this video, we're going to be going over page 1 of MDE LCRR service line inventory spreadsheet, which is related to water system information. And before we get started on the detail of this page, I'm going to show you how this page is laid out. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so that you can see what this page looks like. So you're going to see that we have a section here and also a section to the right of it. And then you're going to have to scroll down because there's also another section to the left that goes down to here. And then we also have another section to the right and the one right below it. And then we have the last section toward the lower right hand portion of the page. So as you can tell, we're going to have to scroll up and down and as well to the left and right to access the entire page that water system will need to fill in the information. So now I'm going to go in to the first section of this page. So I'm going to zoom in to make sure that you guys can see. Okay, so the first section is going to be related to inventory type. And the first field that water system will need to provide the information for is the date submitted / reported. And this will be the date that the water system actually submit the service line inventory spreadsheet to MDE. And and you can see that this cell here is highlighted in yellow, which means that water system should not be leaving this cell blank. So right underneath that cell, now we're going to ask water system to provide the inventory type. So this is a drop-down option, as you can see noted here in blue colored text. And when you select the cell, you're going to see this icon to the right of that cell. It's going to be a triangle that's pointing down button. And all you have to do is click, and then you will see the drop-down options that you can select from. Now, unfortunately, I cannot zoom in anymore, but as I mentioned in another video, that one of the appendices that is in this inventory spreadsheet contains all of the drop-down options, and that appendix is Appendix H. So we are going to go to Appendix H to take a look at the drop-down options. So in order to access the appendices or scrolling through all the pages that we have on this inventory spreadsheet, be sure to go locate at the lower left-hand corner of your spreadsheet. You'll see that there are buttons, a triangle that pointed to the right. When you click on that, it will scroll through all the pages. And when you click on the one on the left, it will scroll back to the earlier pages. So now we're going to locate Appendix H. And this is Appendix H, title drop-down options. So we're going to click on that. And here is the Appendix H. So for Appendix H, you'll see that each of the columns, right, it contains the drop-down options for a specific field that you will see in either page 1, 2A, 2B, 3, or 4. And in order to look for a specific column on each of the pages, you can look on row 3 of Appendix H. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that you guys can see a little bit more. So row 3 is what I would refer to as a reference cell or column. So this indicates which page and or column and or cell that a particular field and the drop-down options belongs. So in this case, if you look at page 1, cell E8, you will see that page 1, cell E8 is inventory type with these drop-down options. So we're going to go back to page 1, right? And let's locate cell E8. So again, I'm going to scroll back to the earlier page, page 1. And then I look at cell E8, which is this one here. That's inventory type and contains these drop-down options, which would be matching with the drop-down options on Appendix H. So again, this is just to show you if, let's say, you want to see all of the drop-down options, right, for a particular field. Sometimes it's easier to go to Appendix H to take a look at what those drop-down options are. So in this case, since it's a bit too small, for you guys to see through the videos, I'm going to show you what these drop-down options are in Appendix H. So here we have locate, right, the columns that we want. So let's scroll down to see what are the options for that particular cell. So in this case, for inventory type, we have 3 different options that you can choose from that your water system will definitely have to make a selection for. The first one is initial inventory. The second one is inventory update with updates/changes. And the last option that you can choose from is inventory update with no updates/changes. So if this inventory spreadsheet is the first one that you will be submitting for your water system, right? Your water system then will need to be sure to select initial inventory in the drop-down options on page 1. So that's what the initial inventory type is, right? So everybody at this point should be submitting initial inventory, right, by the October 16, 2024. Now, in the future, when you are submitting, right, an inventory update, then you will need to select from these 2 options, either inventory update with updates or changes, or inventory update with no updates or changes. So depending on your situation, right, if you are submitting an inventory update for your water system that you actually made changes to or updates to from the previous submission, then you need to be sure to select this second option, which is inventory update with updates and changes. Now, if you are submitting an inventory update that does not have any changes or updates from the previous submission, then you need to be sure to select inventory update with no updates and changes. So we're going to go back to page 1 right now, right, and make some selection to see how the spreadsheet, what the spreadsheet will look like after you make a selection. So we're back on page 1. So for inventory type, we're going to select initial inventory. And once you do that, that's all you have to do for this particular cell. Now, let's say that you are now actually submitting, right, either a year from now or in the future, an inventory update, and it contains updates and changes. So then what you have to do is, again, click on the cell you want to make a change, and then select inventory update with updates and changes. Now, if you are submitting, right, the inventory update with no updates and changes, then you will select the third option here. And as soon as you do that, you'll see that the cells below it, right, that used to be hatched and now becomes unhatched and highlighted in yellow. So when a cell is hatched, that means you do not have to worry about providing information in that particular cell. However, if the cell is highlighted in yellow, right, you would now need to provide information that's being asked in the cell that are highlighted in yellow. So, and we'll go through what these information that we're asking for are related to. So, so in this case, if we are selecting inventory update with no updates or changes, then what MDE is asking water system to do is essentially certifying that you are submitting an inventory update without any updates or changes made to the inventory since the previous submission. So in the cell, right, right below the inventory type, it reads, if inventory type is indicated as inventory update with no updates or changes, water system must certify that there have been no updates or changes made to the inventory since the previous submission. Right? Otherwise, leave blank. So in this case, we're saying that your water system is submitting inventory update with no updates and changes. So, and we're going to make a selection here to say that, yes, I'm certifying that there's no updates and changes. And again, this is a drop-down option, right? It's indicated by this blue text here, pointing to the cell that water system should be making a selection from the drop-down option. And then cells below the certification is asking for the name of the person making a statement above. So that would be whoever is certifying that there's no updates and changes in the inventory update that the water system is submitting to MDE. And we're also asking for title and organization of the person certifying the statement above, as well as phone number and the email address. And this is essentially the end of the first section of this page, right? So now I'm actually going to remove my selection here because everybody at this point, if this is the first submission, right, of the inventory spreadsheet, then everybody should be selecting the first option, which is initial inventory under inventory type. So I'm going to remove this. There's multiple ways you can clear your selection. You can either, if this is a drop down, you can either click on this downward button again, which is a drop down option button, and select a blank entry, or you could right click on the cell that you want to remove the content and then select clear content. So again, there are multiple ways that you can remove content from the cell or drop down options that you selected. So I'm going to change this back to initial inventory because for this example that we're going to be providing in the video, it's going to be related to initial inventory, right? So you can see that after we select initial inventory, these cells become hatched up again, and you will not have to provide any information here. And that is the first section of the inventory type. And now we're going to go to the second section on this page, which is related to water system information. So this is a place where we're going to ask for a little bit more detail related to the water system that you are filling out the service line inventory for. The first information that we're asking for is the public water system ID, or PWSID number. And this is the public water system identification number, right? For water system located in Maryland, the ID would start with MD followed by 7-digit number. So this again is highlighted in yellow. That means water system will need to provide information. And as soon as the water system provided information in the cell, right, the name of the water system will be automatically generated in the cell right below it. And that's why you see next to the water system name, this is the first one that you will see that the cell is highlighted in a salmon colored columns. And if you recall from the earlier video, we mentioned about the color coding, right, that you will see. And the salmon color column indicates that the data related to that is automatically generated by MDE. So again, right, this water system name will be automatically generated when PWSID is provided. And we're asking that the PWSID must start with MD followed by 7 digits without any dashes or space. So we are going to put right now a random number just to show you what it looks like. So I'm just going to do MD 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And of course, we're going to get an error because there's actually no water system name that exists with this particular ID number. So in the cases where you put in a number and you do not see your water system name comes up, it doesn't mean that your water system ID number is incorrect. It could mean also that uh, your water system might not be on a list that is right now attached to the inventory spreadsheet. So first, if you do receive this error, be sure to double check the ID number that you provided right above it. And if you double checked it and it's a correct ID number for your water system and you still receive this error, just go to the cell right below it and provide the name of your water system below. So in the cell here, right below this water system name, we have the entry that's asking for the water system name if, right, the water system name generated above in this cell does not match the name of your water system, or if it does not, exist yet, right? So use this cell, and it's going to be cell E20, right? The cell to provide your water system name. So in this case, let's say if this is our water system name, we are going to just put, my apologies, water system ID number. We're going to put a name under here. We can just say water system ABC. Right, that's our water system name, and that's all you'll have to do. Right now, however, it is likely the situation that you will be able to uh, have your water system name generated in this cell instead of an error message. And that's because when you put in your water system name, what will happen is we'll look for this particular ID number against the list that we have extracted and included within the spreadsheet itself. And if you recall from one of our earlier videos, we have an appendix that contains the list of all water systems that we extracted when the spreadsheet was made, which was March 2024. So let's go to that particular page so that we can take a look what that page looks like. So again, I'm going to scroll through all the tabs right underneath at the bottom here, right? And I'm going to locate Appendix J. So Appendix J title, the tab name is MD Water System List, right? So when we click on that, this is going to be, it's going to contain the table of the public water system that we extracted from MDE's database. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that we can see the text. So Appendix J is a list of community and non-transient non-community water systems in Maryland. And this list was extracted in March of 2024, right? So here, when you put the ID number, right, in the correct format on page 1, the water system name will appear. If the public water system ID number exists on this list. So again, this is just to show you that this is the list that we have, and that. So when I go back to page 1, right, the number that you provide here for your water system, right, the name of your water system would be generated here. Okay, so again, if you put in the ID and the water system name does not appear, feel free to and you do not find your water system on the list, feel free to contact MDE. However, feel free to also put in your water system name in this cell, okay, which is cell E20. So next piece of information that we're asking water system for is public water system type. So this is a drop-down option, and there are two options for this particular cell. Is either community or non-transient non-community water system. So depending on the type of your water system, you just have to be sure to select the proper uh, uh, selection from the drop-down. So in this case, we're just gonna, as an example, we're gonna keep this as community water system. Next, water system will need to provide the principal county served. Again, this is a drop-down options of all counties within Maryland. So you just have to make a selection again, right, from the drop-down. Right. Next is population served. So this will depend on your water system, and this is not a drop down. So your water system will need to put in the number of people here. And again, this is the data entry without the drop down option. So you just have to put in, for example, if you have 50, right, or 500, and whatever that population that you have for your water system, you just have to provide it here. Next is the number of service connections. And again, this is the cell where you have to input the actual number. It's not a drop-down option. Now, depending on how you define the number of service connection, it could be different, from water system to water system. So that's why the next row underneath number of service connection, we ask, how does public water system define service connections? Now, this is a drop-down option. So we're going to take a look at what the options are. So right now we have 3 options, and I'm actually going to go back to Appendix H so that we can see all the options at the same time, and a little bit bigger as well. So again, I'm going to scroll through all the pages and locate Appendix H. And before we do that, let's go back to page 1 just for a second here and try to see, using the reference cell, right, so that we can find the columns that we want on Appendix H. So this cell is E25, and you can tell as well is E25 if you look at this section here of this spreadsheet. So right above column A and B, you should see a little white box here, and it actually said E25. Hopefully you can see. If you cannot, if you're following along on your end with your spreadsheet, you should see whenever you select a cell, right, the cell number will update, and this, you could tell that this is E25. So right now we're going to look for page 1 E25 on on Appendix H to see what the drop-down options are. So we're going to go to drop-down options, and we're going to look under row 3, right? We're going to look for page 1, cell E25. So I found it here, right, under column F. So I'm going to scroll through that. And you can see this is asking, how does public water system, or PWS, define service connection? And now we're going to look at the options available. Right now, there are 3 options total for that. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more so that you can see it a little bit bigger. So here, the first option is the water system defines the service connections as the number of tie-ins to the water main. Right? So if this is how you define the number of service connection, then you make sure that you select this option for your water system. Now, we also provide an option that the water system may define their service, the number of the service connection, and that could be the number of billed accounts and or buildings / structures served. So if this is how you count the number of service connections for your water system, then be sure to select that. Now, if you come up with the number of service connection that is not either from the number of tie-ins to the water main or the number of billed accounts and or buildings or structure served, then you should select other. And please be sure to contact MDE so that we would like to know how you defined the service connections. So again, these are the available options. So we're going to scroll back and navigate back to page 1, right? So whatever, however you came up with the number of service connection in this cell, E24, right? You just have to make sure you provide a corresponding definition of service connection, again, established by your water system. So for example, if there are, I'm just going to make up some random number, let's say, there are 100 number of service connection, and this is, based on the fact that we count the number of tie-ins to the water main, then that would be how you would make the selection here. Or let's say if you actually use the number of billed accounts, right, that would be the options that you select. And so that's how PWS define service connections. So then the next part of this section is asking for public water system contact name. So we want to know the name of the person who's a contact person at your water system, as well as the title or position of that contact, as well as organization, email address, and phone number. Right below that, we're also asking for the name of the person completing the inventory. If this person is the same person as a contact person for your water system, then you can provide that same information for that person here as well. So it can be the same person, or it could be a different person altogether that completes the inventory for your water system. And again, we're asking for the name, the title, position, organization, email address, and phone number. And in this section, we have 2 more fields that we're asking. One is for water system to provide the names of all organizations or companies providing assistance in developing the inventory. So if your water system works with an organization or a company to develop the inventory or service line inventory for your water system, then please be sure to provide the name of those organizations or companies that help you with that. And then lastly, in this section, we have a place for you to provide any comments regarding the inventory spreadsheet that you would like MDE to know. So this, any comments that you have that you want to make regarding the service line inventory or the information on the spreadsheet, if you'd like to elaborate on certain things, be sure to use this cell to include that. And that is the end of this section for water system information. And now we're going to scroll all the way back up, right? And then we're going to scroll to the left. Oh, my apologies, to the right. Because we have more sections that water system will need to complete. And this section is titled Information Related to Service Line Records. So by October 16, 2024, water system, in addition to completing the service line inventory spreadsheet, part of that is that water system will need to also complete the review of all the records related to service line inventory. And this is the place for water system to indicate to MDE that they have complete that requirement. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that you can see what this section looks like as a whole. So we have this table that water system will need to complete, and you can see that all of these cells are highlighted in yellow. So be sure to provide information in the cell. So if you see that there are yellow highlight the cells that are blank, be sure not to skip that, right? So and we're going to go through what is being asked for water system to provide in this section of page 1. So I'm going to zoom back in. So here is the table that we title Records Review. And then we reference Appendix C, and then we're going to go over to Appendix C in a little bit to see what that contains. So this is records review required to be completed when water systems submit their initial inventory due October 16, 2024. So before we go to Appendix C, just take a look at maybe what this table contains. So we have a column for type of record, right? So you'll see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total. And for each of these types of record, the next column over to it will ask you to describe the records reviewed for your water systems inventory, right? So this will be the location where you would provide a description of the records that your water system has reviewed related to the service line inventory. Okay, and the next column over, we're asking for water system to indicate the level of confidence in the accuracy of the type of record that you have reviewed. So this is a drop-down option. So when you click on a cell, we'll see what these drop-down options are. I don't want to go into detail just yet. I'll come back and talk a little bit more about this in a little bit. And then the last column over, we asked water system to provide the date of most recent update to the required records review. We understand that over time, right, you might come across additional records that you might not have, when you are completing the initial inventory, right? And if that is the case, then we would like you to make sure that you provide the date that you review the records most recently. So for instance, if let's say in certain category of the records, you do not have the records for that at all, right? For that type, then you would still put in the date that you submit the initial inventory as the date that you complete that requirement because you reviewed that type of record even though it doesn't exist, right? And then let's say then next year you are going to submit the inventory update and you actually came across a piece of record and you have reviewed it since the last time you submitted the inventory, then you would need to make sure you update this date to the most recent one. Now, before we go into, an example, let's say we're going to go through an example of how when we are filling out these cell, what it would look like. Let's go through the types of record that is required for water system to review. So first is related to previous material evaluation. So actually, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more in case you have a smaller screen. So first type of record that your water system will need to review is previous material evaluation. Now, you can see in this blue text that this type of record would be applicable to community water systems only. So if your water system is non-transient non-community water system, you do not have to provide anything in the related to the first type of record here. So you may leave this blank, or you could put in if you want to. If you feel like you don't want to leave anything blank, you can say not applicable, right? That's something you can also say, or you can feel free to leave that blank only if you are non-transient non-community water system. Oops. So the second type of record is related to construction records and plumbing codes. The third type of records is related to water system records. And the fourth type of record is distribution systems, inspections, and records. And the last type of records is other records. So any records that doesn't fit in these of the 4 categories here or 4 types here, then if you do have, records that that you came across as related to service line inventory and it doesn't fit into the other type, then you can use this cell. Oops, my apologies. Use the cell right next to it to provide a description of what those records that you have are. So I kind of skipped this a little bit, but you can see that under each of these type, we also provide an example, right? For example, the first type, previous material evaluation. Example would be materials survey of water distribution system required under 40 CFR section 141.42D and lead and copper rule that shows tier 1 sampling sites with lead service lines. So this is an example of the records that would fit under this type. Then we have the same thing, examples for construction records and plumbing code, which could be local ordinance, adopting an international plumbing code, or permits for replacing lead service lines. Same thing here for water system records, which could be capital improvement plans, standard operating procedures, or engineering standards. And for distribution system inspections and records, examples include distribution system maps, tap tie drill service cards, service line repair or replacement records, inspection records, meter installation records. So you can see here in this table, we provide a few examples for each of the type, right? But if you recall, we here also reference Appendix C. So let's navigate to Appendix C to see what information that we can look at that actually provides a little bit more detail for each of these types of records. So again, I'm going to use the icons at the lower left-hand corner. I'm going to scroll until I see Appendix A through G, right? Appendix A through Appendix G tab, because Appendix C between that. And again, I'm going to zoom in so you can see here. So Appendix C is required records review. So we're going to click here. Oh, before I do that, let me open a new window real quick. And let's see. Okay, and I'm going to click and it pops up on the other screen. So here we go. This is Appendix C. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, right? So you can see Appendix C is titled Required Records Review. And when you look at this particular document, it's going to be in the form of tables, and you can scroll. There's 2 pages total, right? And this table actually comes from EPA's guidance for developing and maintaining service line inventory that EPA put out in 2022. And the table contains the types of records. So there are 4 total, right? Similar to what we have on the spreadsheet, we have previous materials evaluation. Again, applicable only for community water systems. We have construction and plumbing codes and records. We also have water system records and distribution system inspections and records. And in this table, though, you can find a little bit more detail, which we're not going to go into in this training video, but the water system should look at this appendix to gain a little bit more information related to what is the regulation requirements, right? And what are the primary uses for the inventory development, right? So, for example, previous material evaluations could be used for reporting construction material present in their distribution system, or identifying lead service line materials for a subset of sites that were used for lead and copper tap monitoring. And same thing with other types as well. So be sure to check out and review Appendix C if you need a little more information regarding the type of records that your water system needs to review. So we're gonna now go back to the spreadsheet itself, and we're gonna go back to page 1, right? Back to this table where we actually need to provide a description of the records that water system have reviewed. So, so if you have documents here, you can just start, describing what those records are, right? So these cells here, right underneath, under the column describe the records review for your water system inventory. This is where you would provide the information or detailed description of the records that your water system have that you have reviewed. Now, if you come across a situation where you do not have any information under a particular type of record, right? And you have looked through all of your water system records and you cannot find it, right? Then, for example, let's do something related to distribution systems, inspections, and records. Now, that might not be the case for your water system, but in case if you come across, let's say, you look through all of your water system records and you did not find any records under this type, then you can provide a statement that says something along the line of performed records review, but cannot locate or find any records under this type of records, or something along that line, right? So however you want to put it, this is to indicate to us that you cannot find anything, but you have performed the records review. So this is something that, again, even if you don't have anything under a certain type or category of records, you should still provide a statement that indicated you have complete this requirement, even though there's nothing there, because you have looked through and there's nothing that you can find, right? So that's just something that you can certainly put. And so again, though, be sure that these cells are not blank as long as it's applicable to your water system. So if it is not applicable to your water system, right, in certain cells, then you should leave them blank. But if it is applicable to your water system, then there should be some statement made in these in this yellow highlighted cells. So for community water system, we are expecting that we will see some type of statement in these yellow highlighted cells for all types of records, right? For non-transient and community water system, then we are not expect to see anything made for the first type of records, which is the previous materials evaluation, but we are expecting to see a statement for other types of records. Okay, so that's the column for water system to describe the records review for your water system inventory. So let's look at the next column in a little bit more detail. So the next column over is level of confidence in the accuracy of this type of records. So depending on the records that you have, and when you look and review those records, you might in your assessment, right? What is the level of confidence that you have in terms of how accurate that information or that record is for your water system? So depending on the level of confidence that you have determined it to be, you need to make sure that you make one of these selections. So we have option for low level of confidence and accuracy, medium level of confidence and accuracy, or high level of confidence and accuracy. Again, this will be based on the water system assessment. Okay, and then the last column here again, I will repeat that you would need to, again, you should not be leaving any of these cells that are highlighted in yellow blank unless it's not applicable. And when you do review, when you review the records, and you complete that review for, let's say, construction records and plumbing code, you would put in the date that you complete that review, right, in this cell, under this column, and whatever that date may be. And then in the future, if you come across some new information that would have you, perform another review again, right? Then when you submit the inventory update, you would make an update to this date. For example, let's say I perform my records review on the day that I'm going to submit the inventory spreadsheet, right? And would be October 16, 2024, for example. And then a year later, I came across another piece of information under construction records and plumbing codes, right? And I perform another review. And a year later, then it would be, let's say, exactly a year later. So then I would make sure that I change from 2024 to 2025, right? And that's how, when we receive the inventory update, some of the things that we will look for is, has there been any changes related to your records review, right? And this column here is how we determine whether or not your water system has performed any additional records review since the last time you submit the inventory to MDE. Okay. So if there's no changes from the previous submission, then we would say this water system did not do any additional records review, right, since the last time. And it's not required that you have to do the records review again in the future. It's just that in the situation where you actually did records review in the future, either you find additional records or things change, then we just have to make sure that your water system updates the information accordingly. And this is the end of the table related to information related to service line records. Okay, so now we're going to scroll down to the next section of this page, and it is titled Information Related to Service Line Identification During Normal Operations. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that you can see the table in its entirety here, right? So this right here is the entire table. It contains 2 questions total, and we're going to go through each of these questions right now. So I'm going to zoom back in. Okay, here we go. So this table is trying to get a little bit more information from your water system related to whether or not your water system identifies service line material during normal operations. So the first question is, during which normal operating activities is your water system collecting information on service line material? And we are asking our water system to check all that applies, right? And so some of the example of normal operating activities are water meter reading, water meter repair or replacement, service lines repair or replacement, water main repair or replacement, backflow prevention device inspection, and we also have the options for other. So if you happen to select other, we ask that you also explain in the cell below it, right here, what those other activities include. And the second question, we're asking, did your water system develop or revise standard operating procedures to collect service line material information during normal operations. So if your water system have a standard operating procedure to collect service line material information during normal operations, then you would make sure that you select from the drop down yes, right? Or if the answer is no, be sure to select no. Now, if you happen to select yes, then we ask for a little bit more detail of what that standard operating procedures may be that you have developed, right? Um, and you can provide that information in the cell here below the yes. And that is it for this section of the of this page for information related to service line identification during normal operations. Okay, and so we have one more section that the water system will need to worry about. And this one, we're going to scroll down a little bit until we see related to connectors. Okay, so this section is a section that we have set up here to account for the fact that EPA will, in the near future, we hope that they will finalize the definition of the connector. At this point in time, when the spreadsheet is created and when the video is being recorded, the EPA has not yet come out with the final definition for the connector. And so to account for the changes that could happen in the future, we have included this section here where water system will need to make an update to the cell highlighted in blue that would correspond with the final definition of the connector that will be established by the EPA. Now, at this point in time, the water system should not be making any changes until instructed by MDE. So by default, the information related to connector is set to be less than or equal to 100 feet. 100 feet. And at this point, it should remain like this until MDE, until water system are instructed by MDE to make the changes. So if MDE has not provided instruction on how these numbers should be updated, then there's nothing for water system to do. And water system should get email communication from MDE if these changes need to be made. So at this point in time, when the video is recording, water system are not making any changes right now. Okay, so why is this important? This is important because EPA will be making a decision on how to define the connector. And if the connector is greater than a certain length, it may become a lead service line if that connector is made of lead material. So here, as you can see, what these blue colored cell is representing is right now, again, by default, a placeholder at this point, right? A maximum length of connector in feet. So right now we're setting that, connector maximum length is less than or equal to 100 feet because, again, EPA has not yet made a final decision on the definition of connector. And what does it mean when we talk about maximum length of connector? So you can look at this a little bit more description here, and I'm going to read it out loud. It reads, lead connector with a length that is greater than the length in the EPA's definition of a connector will be considered as a lead service line or LSL pipe. right? And the spreadsheet is designed to automatically take this into account when generating service line material classification based on connector information provided on page 2B. So in another video, we'll be talking exclusively information that we're asking for on page 2B. But at this point on page 1, right, what we are doing here is we're having a placeholder so that when EPA finally come out with the definition of the connector, we'll make the updates here accordingly, and the water system will need to be the one doing that. And MDE will provide instruction for that. But this these numbers will come into effect if your water system has a lead connector. If your water system does not have any lead connectors, then this information will not affect the service line material classification at all. Now, if your water system has a lead connector or has lead connectors, then depending on the EPA's definition of a connector, the lead connectors that you have may be considered a lead service line if it exceeds certain length. And at this point, we do not have that length established yet because EPA has not finalized that yet. So again, these cells should be left as what you're seeing on the screen until instructed by MDE if any changes need to be made. And this concludes the sections that require water system information input. On page 1, however, we have a section that that MDE has created in order to provide a little bit more information related to service lines, that information that water system provide on pages 2A, 2B, 3, and 4. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that you can see what this section looks like. And you can see that the entire section, at least the column headers, are in salmon colored columns. And if you recall, these salmon colored columns indicate that the data is generated by MDE, right? So water system will not need to do anything for these columns at all or cells. However, it is useful for water system to take a look because it actually summarizes the information as your water system are completing the inventory. So we're going to go into this a little bit more detail so that you can see what I mean. But I'm going to zoom in right now to show you what the title of this section is. So this section is titled Service Line Connection and Classification Summary, and it's auto-generated data. So again, it's the data auto-generated based on the information that your water system provide on the inventory spreadsheet. So the first table under this section is going to be related to connection type. And this is not to be confused with connector. For connection type here, that's what we're looking at here right now, is the type of building or structure that the service line is connected to. And that's what we refer to as connection type. So as you can see here, the underneath the connection type, these are some of the categories of the type of connection that each of the service line can have. So service line can be connected to a residential type structure, right, or a non-residential type structure. It could be connected to a mixed residential or non-residential type structure. It could also be connected to empty or unoccupied building. And keep in mind that for the service line inventory, all service lines should be accounted for, including those that are connected to an empty or unoccupied building. And if it doesn't fit into any of these types, then it would be categorized as other. But what is this table doing here is it's going to start summarizing the number of service line under each of these connection types. And so at this point, we're just seeing zeros, right? Because we haven't really populated any data on other pages yet. And you'll see later on page 2A, we will be asking water system to provide a connection type for each of the service lines. So we'll go into more detail in another video for page 2A. However, when we're going to revisit this table again when we start populating the data, because you'll see that when you make a selection for a connection type that resemble a residential structure, you will see that this number will change from 0, right, to other numbers depending on how many service lines you have that are connected to residential type structures. So so this is a good table for water system to come back and look at from time to time to see how far along what your water system in terms of providing information related to service lines. And we also have the number that is summed up later under total connections. So this would signify the number of a total number of service lines as well. So the table underneath that is pretty long in terms of, we have a lot of columns. So I'm just going to scroll quickly just to see how many columns we have here. Again, this is not for water system to provide any information. This is a place where, excuse me, some of the data are being summarized here to show you at the end, right? After you complete all the pages that your water system required to provide the data, then when you come back to this page under this table, you will be able to see, right, the number of service lines in each of the service line classification. So this table started with PWSID number, right? It's pulling the data that water system provides and put them here. And then the next column over is related to service line classification. So there are 4 classifications for service line materials. The first one is lead service line. The next one is galvanized requiring replacement service lines, or abbreviated as GRR. We also have lead status unknown service line. And the last category is non-lead service line. And when you complete all of the data entry for your water system, right, you will see this number from 0 being some other numbers depending on how many lead service line or galvanized requiring service lines, lead status unknown service line, or non-lead service lines your water system have. And I'm skipping, I skipped report date. Again, this number is being pulled. Now it's blank here because we haven't provided that number, the date, the report date, and where is that coming from? So I'm gonna scroll back toward the top of the page and also to the left, right? And I'm gonna do it quickly here. So this is the report date that your water system should provide. So I'm just going to put in the date where everything's due. I mean, when the initial inventory is due. So, October 16, 2024. Right? As soon as I make this data entry, I'm going to go back to the table that we were just at. And you're going to see that date being populated here. And that's what we're seeing here now. Right, so again, this table is pulling the data from page 1 as well as other pages. So to give you a summary of the service line inventory for your water system. So let's look at each of these columns, right? So under each of the categories here that we have, service line inventory, service line classification, the 4 classification here, and I'm going to try my best to keep that column visible. Okay, so this column current number is indicating the summary of the number of service line in each of these classification. Again, right now it's all 0, but as you're inputting data on your service line inventory, you should see the summation of each of the categories here. And in addition to just, summing up the number of service line material classification for each of the classification here, we also provide a column that summarizes the number of currently active service line, as well as the number of currently inactive service lines, or the number, and my apology, and the number of service lines of unknown activity status. So you may recall that the requirement for service line inventory is that you need to include all the service lines, and it doesn't matter whether the service line is currently active or inactive, right? So as part of the information that you need to provide, you'll see later that we are also asking for water system to provide whether the service line is currently active, currently inactive, or maybe you don't know and you don't have time to go and figure that out right now. Then you would put, as don't know or unknown for the activity status. So again, we're talking about the activity status, whether it's currently being used, supplying water to a building, or the water is not flowing through that pipe right now, right, that service line right now, or maybe you don't know whether or not the water service is being active or not. Then again, the summary of the numbers then will be summarized here. And we include this information here because we believe that it provides a bit more context when we see, for example, if you have hundreds lead service line, but maybe most of them are inactive, right? Then that provides a little bit more context to your water system in terms of the lead service lines or service lines in other categories. And then the next sets of columns, and what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to freeze certain pane right now, so that, because I want to make sure that you see as we scroll to the right, I want you guys to be able to see the service line material classification. So quickly, and I'm gonna make this column smaller. Okay, so as we scroll through the rest of the columns, right, you'll see that we also include 2 columns related to number of non-lead service lines validated through records review and or visual inspection, or and also the number of service lines that were not validated through records review and or visual inspection. So EPA has proposed to have a requirement of additional validation for non-lead service lines that were not initially validated through records review and or visual inspection. So in order to kind of give water system a little bit more information based on the information that water system provide in the spreadsheet, the inventory spreadsheet here, we summarize the number of non-lead service lines that have been validated through records review and or visual inspection, and the numbers of service lines that have not been validated through records review or visual inspection. So that way water system will know, okay, well, how many of the non-lead service lines I have to worry about perhaps in the future if EPA finalize that requirement that that will essentially require water system to perform additional records review or visual inspection on a certain number of non-lead service lines. So that's why we have these two columns here provided for water system on this page. And then the next few columns, let's see, how many columns total? Ooh, we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the last 6 columns in this table is all related to connectors. So you can see the word connectors here. And again, this is just extra information for water system as well as for MDE, because EPA is also proposing that states report the number of known lead connectors and lead connectors that have been replaced, or connectors that are unknown, basically. So in order to kind of plan ahead, if states actually have to do that, then we would have the information ready to go, right? So as you're looking through these the tables here, you'll see, okay, we are summarizing the number for each of the categories, right? For service line material classification, how many number of known lead connectors are for lead service lines, right? Or galvanized requiring replacement service line, lead status unknown, or non-lead service lines. And the same thing for lead connectors replaced, right? Do you have any lead connectors that have been replaced in any of these service line material classification? And how many lead connectors that are unknown? And and then we also have the number of non-lead connectors that that were not, that exists, but not through the replacement or permanent removal. So we understand that, for the fact that EPA may be asking states to report lead connectors that have been replaced, your water system might already have, non-lead connectors that exist, not through a replacement of lead connectors, right? So, again, we are providing a little bit more information in the case where if we have to report certain numbers to EPA, then we have the numbers ready. And then the next one is related to lead connectors that consider lead service line pipe. So again, your water system might be in a situation where you have a lead connector that is exceed a certain length that EPA has defined the connectors to be. And anything that is greater than that particular length that EPA defined would be considered a lead service line pipe. So we also summarizing that number here. So you don't have any lead connectors that are considered lead service line pipe, then all of these, would be a 0. And the last one here that I want to just mention quickly is the number of lead connectors considered a lead service line pipe that has been replaced, right? So over time, we understand that if you are in the situation where, yes, you have a lead connectors that are considered a lead service line pipe, in the future, you're replacing those, right, over time, then if these numbers were greater than 0, then when you replace it over time, it will go back to 0, but then it would be now in this category instead. So again, water system will not have to worry about generating these datas at all. It's, again, automatically generated based on the information that your water system provides. And you'll see in the later videos when we cover pages 2 through 4 that we are asking water system to provide information like that your water system should already have information on. And so we'll go into much more detail. And as we go through the rest of the pages, and we work on some example, you'll see that these numbers, will start to go up. And, and again, it will be automatically generated. So at this point, we have reached the end of the page 1. So I'm going to zoom back out just to see, overall, we have covered, right, all of these sections, right? And the sections that are not in salmon colors are the sections that your water system have to worry about. So again, just to recap, right? The sections that the water system will have to worry about includes inventory type, water system information. Again, that one goes all the way down to here. And now we have to scroll back up and scroll to the right. So the next section that the water system will have to worry about is information related to service line records. Also information related to service line identification during normal operations. And lastly, information related to connectors. Well, let me make this a little bit bigger. All right, related to connectors. Again, for information related to connectors, water system will not need to do anything until instructed by MDE. And this is the end of page 1, water system information.